Kiara, Assalamu alaikum. This is day one of UTS Open Education Week. I'm Mais Fataya. For those relying on audio only today, I'd like to describe my appearance. I look like an Arab woman in my 40s, wearing an Islamic headscarf. It's called hijab, and I'm wearing a yellow shirt and black blazer. I work at UTS as a manager learner experience design. I'll be facilitating the debate today. My colleagues, Janet Wang, Jenny Wallace, Helen Chan, will be managing the chat and co-facilitating the session. We will be recording this session and making it available under Creative Commons license after the event. If you prefer not to appear in the recording, please keep your video off. Also reminding you that captioning and transcription are enabled today. I would like to start with acknowledging country. I acknowledge that we are hosting this virtual event today on unceded Gadigal land. I pay my respect to Gadigal people and recognize the ongoing and enduring connection they have to country. This land always was and always will be Gadigal. I extend this acknowledgement to all unceded lands from which you may be joining this event. Sovereignty was never ceded and justice has never been fully served. I acknowledge the ongoing impacts of colonization and the pain, suffering, and intergenerational trauma experienced by all original peoples here and around the world. It is my pleasure to welcome everyone joining us today. This is our fourth year running Open Education Week here at UTS, and we are very proud to be the only Australian university actually hosting this global event. In the past few years, I worked with fantastic colleagues who dedicated time and expertise. This year, we worked with Jenny Wallace, Janet Wang, Chris Gridler, and Lucy Blackmore from Education Portfolio, and our very wonderful colleague from UTS Library, Helen Chan, who supported us greatly this time, as she has always done. So we're doing a little bit different session today. We're going to do a debate. It's wonderful to see many people joining, new people and the people who've joined us before. The motion that we have today is mainly generative AI is fundamentally incompatible with open educational practices. So I'd like to share with you a few things. I like to think of open education movement as something with a much longer history than what we usually talk about. Not just the last 25 years since the term was formalized, but genuinely a human movement, an idea people have been practicing for a long time. For example, we built our numerical system on the Hindu-Arabic numerical system developed by Indian mathematicians like Brahmagupta around the 7th century. Our modern computing system, for example, also built on the idea of algorithms. That word comes directly from a Muslim scholar, Al-Khwarizmi, who worked in the 9th century. Fast forward to the last 20th century, 1998, for example, David Wiley introduced the term open content, and Creative Commons created open licenses, which gave that idea a legal shape. In 2002, UNESCO introduced open educational resources, and following from that time, many initiatives appeared. What sits underneath all of this history is one thing: openness. The idea that knowledge should be shared, built upon, and made available for everyone. And now that idea is meeting its most complex challenge yet. Generative AI is transforming education at a pace that we've never seen before, helping creating educational resources in minutes that we used actually to do it in months. Now, the opportunities are real, and so the questions it raises for the movement built on openness. Should open education embrace generative AI as the next expression of that openness, or does it threaten the very value this movement was built on? For our debate, we will rely on two definitions today. The first one, open education practices, that comes from Jangani and Jangani to 2024. The OEP refers to the design of learning experiences that integrate open educational resources and open licenses to force collaboration, knowledge sharing, learner agency. The benefits are significant for students in cost saving, better educational outcomes for learners, better pedagogical flexibility for educators, and more inclusive practices. We also rely on the definition of UTS library for generative AI, that is a type of artificial intelligence that uses machine learning algorithms to produce copy or rework content, which can be in text, imagery, audio, code, or many other formats. We're going to hear today what our debaters think in terms of that motion. But before we go to our debaters, I would like to invite our audience to respond to these two statements and tell us what they think. Where do they sit? The first statement suggests that generative AI compromises the principles of open education that the learning and teaching community is built to uphold. The other statement, generative AI will transform open educational practices by enabling genuine co-creation and greater efficiency. Let's see where our audience sits in terms of these two statements. Yeah, got more people joining the Menti. You'll be able to find link to the Menti in the chat. And the number, you can see it on the screen. So if you go to menti.com and just type the code, you'll be able to answer this question. You also have access to the slides. Okay. Got more people joining. Gonna wait a few more seconds. Okay, let's see. Got almost 24 responses, 25 now. Want to go more? All right. Let's reveal. Okay, that's interesting. A little bit leaning towards agreeing with both statements. There is actually a threat, but also the people see opportunities. Interesting. All right. Now, we're going to do a debate today to see where we're going to end with this motion. The debate is going to go into 3 rounds and a closing statement. We're going to have, for the first round, we're going to listen to the opening position from each team. They will have 3 minutes each. Round 2, we're going to go in to listen to their arguments, 6 minutes each team. Then we're going to send them to breakout rooms to talk amongst each other and come back. We're going to have our rebuttals, 4 minutes for each team, and we're going to end up with a closing statement. I'll remind the team 1 minute before the end of the time, and I'll remind them at the end of the time. And I'm going to apologize in advance for this, but we're going to mute you if you keep talking 5 seconds. That is the grace period. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I am going to let you only hear my computer audio. And I would like to welcome our teams, our debaters. So it's a great pleasure and honor to introduce to you from the affirmative team, University of Southern Queensland, Claire Ovaska. Claire is the university copyright manager and a former coordinator at James Cook University Libraries Textbook Affordability Project 2024-2025 and Open Education Program. Claire believes in the power of academic libraries to expand opportunities for students, researchers, and communities. Her work is guided by a strong interest in improving outcomes and well-being for underrepresented groups, including individuals from low socioeconomic backgrounds, First Nation communities, migrants, and individuals experiencing disability. Welcome, Claire. Lovely to have you with us. And on University of Southern Queensland team also, I would like to welcome Nikki Anderson. Nikki is joining us again for the second time in our Open Education Week. She was with us a few years back. Nikki is now Senior Manager, Digital Library and Open Practitioner at the University of Southern Queensland. She's won numerous awards for her work in open education, diversity, equity, and inclusion, including Open Educational and Global Award and the Australian Award for University Teaching. Welcome both. Welcome, Affirmative Team, University of Southern Queensland, Claire and Nikki. Lovely to have you with us. Now, on the opposition team, we have Deakin University. Also, warm welcome to Dr. Sarah's team. Sarah is also a fellow Higher Education Advanced. She's Senior Lecturer and Course Director at Deakin Business School. Sarah developed an OER featuring real-world role-play scenarios to build students' employability skills. This has been a very popular resource, 6,000 plus visitors, and it's actually been adopted by Australian universities, international universities, and state of government training program. This OER is very popular and has been featured on podcasts, press books, Open Education Global Down Under webinars. Sarah earned her 2025 Deakin Vice Chancellor Award for outstanding contribution to education and employability. Welcome, Sarah. Lovely having you with us today. And last but not least, Dr. Lorraine Helcom-Smith. Lorraine is a lecturer lecturer in open education, actually, in Deakin University Library. Her role is focused on research and academic capability building related to open education resources and OER-related practices at Deakin. Lorraine has a PhD in educational studies from McGill University, and a background in teaching, research, learning design, and leadership in higher education. Welcome, everyone. It is fantastic to see you joining, debating, and we are going to learn so much today from your input. So, let's get started. Everybody's ready? Anyone have any questions? Like to say anything? Okay, I'm going to start with affirmative team. I'm going to start with Claire and the mic and start now.
Thanks, Max. Good morning, Chair, colleagues and members of the audience. Today's debate topic is generative AI fundamentally incompatible with open educational practices could not be more timely. We are living through a period of profound transformation driven by artificial intelligence technologies, one that is being shaped by how knowledge is appropriated, created, shared and valued. To be clear, when Nikki and I refer to generative AI or AI, we are speaking about the practices and methods used to train AI systems, as well as the platforms that use algorithms to generate content in response to prompts. And when we speak of open educational practices or OEP, we're referring to the design of learning experiences that could involve open educational resources and the equitable learner agency. Through open licensing to foster collaboration and knowledge sharing. Nikki and I strongly believe that Gen AI is fundamentally incompatible with OEP as it conflicts with the principles of transparency, attribution, ethical reuse, and equity on which OEP depends. To understand why this incompatibility is fundamental, we need to examine it through a lens of agency and power. OEP is grounded in a deliberate values-based stance. They ask educators to make a conscious choice about what they share, how they share it, and under what circumstances others may reuse and adapt that work. Many of you will know that the gifting of knowledge to the world is something that resonates strongly with our university open education practitioners who care deeply about the public good. OEP are fundamental to advancing education as a human right because they decentralise both authority and the access to high quality learning. They enable educators and learners to act as co creators of knowledge with the autonomy to adapt and reshape resources in ways that reflect local contexts, learner needs, and cultural realities. In contrast, AI technologies reflect dominant paradigms, and access to them is unlikely to be equitably distributed, particularly for those already on the wrong side of the digital divide. We can expect AI technologies to become more sophisticated, and over time, they may be brought into closer alignment with ethical and equitable use. However, history shows human nature leans towards concentrating power and authority in the hands of the few rather than more broadly. The public good values of open education are fundamentally at odds with how generative AI has been designed. And Nikki will examine.
Sorry, Claire, that's your time. They have to move to now Deacon's team. And we're going to hear from Sarah.
Education is not static. Looking back in history, every generation has thought that the newest innovation or tool would be one that destroys education, ruining learning. Printed books were considered as a challenge to traditional learning methods. Calculators were going to destroy mental maths, and the internet was going to end real research. In each of these examples, it was thought that they would be incompatible with real deep learning. Yet none of these innovations broke education. In fact, they have been essential components of modern education. When we consider AI, it is no different. AI is not a future possibility. It's already embedded in how students learn, access information, and participate in education today. So the question is no longer whether it's compatible with open education practices. The reality is, if we don't acknowledge it and embrace AI's contribution to access, equity, and collaboration, AI won't challenge open educational practices. It will redefine it without us. Just like the internet and education, AI and open education practices are fundamentally compatible. Hello, I'm Sarah and my teammate Lauren from Deakin University. We are here today to argue against the proposition that open education practices are fundamentally incompatible. Now, let's be really clear here. Fundamentally incompatible means they are unable to work together in a meaningful way. That is a very strong claim. Open education is about opening access to learning. It doesn't pick and choose which doors to open. If AI is already part of education, a bell that cannot be unrung, then open education must include it. To argue they are incompatible is to close a door which goes against the very purpose of open education. So, we firmly believe that AI is compatible with open education practices. And later, Lauren will prove this through showing the why by drawing on the philosophy of open education, and the how through sharing student examples to argue that AI advances equitable access to education, and in so highlighting that AI is fundamentally compatible. I will now pass over to USQ to Nikki to hear their arguments on why they believe open education practices and AI are fundamentally incompatible. Not that there is tension or that they're difficult to reconcile, but that they are completely unable to work together in a meaningful way. Thank you.
Wonderful. Let's move on to round two.
Thanks.
We're going to hear from Nikki on the arguments.
Thanks, Sarah. So, Gen A is fundamentally incompatible with open education for many ethical and practical reasons, but today I'm only going to focus on two main points. The first is that Gen AI fundamentally conflicts with the transparency, attribution, and ethical ownership that open education depends on. Open education is built on principles championed by frameworks like Creative Commons, where knowledge must be transparent, attributable, legally reusable, and respectful of creators' rights. Gen AI systems undermine all of these at once. These systems are black boxes. We don't know exactly what data they were trained on or how outputs are generated. Outputs are synthesized from countless sources with no clear citation or traceability back to original authors. And without attribution or transparency, it becomes nearly impossible to comply with open licenses or enforce creator rights. As someone who's worked on publishing 25 open textbooks with academics and has also published my own, I've only used Gen AI a handful of times, and only to create ancillary resources from open textbooks where my university owned the intellectual property. For most other open educational practices, it's actually impossible to be compliant and respectful of moral rights. Gen AI and open education are fundamentally incompatible because creators are not credited, copyright owners are not compensated, work is reused outside the intent of its license. This turns open sharing into a one-way extraction, where value is taken but not returned. Open education is a reciprocal system. People share knowledge with the expectation of attribution, reuse under agreed terms, and community benefit. Gen AI breaks all of that. This isn't openness, it's extraction. It takes from creators without consent and calls it innovation. And while there may be a place for Gen AI within open education in the future, that would require significant changes to Australian copyright law, licensing frameworks, and enforcement mechanisms, including clear requirements for attribution, consent-based training data, and fair compensation models. Until then, the current reality is that Gen AI operates outside the ethical and legal foundation that open education depends on. My second argument is that while open education is designed to reduce inequality and amplify diverse voices, Gen AI risks deepening inequalities and reinforcing existing biases. Open education began with a powerful moral idea that knowledge should not belong only to the privileged. It should be open, shared, and accessible to everyone, regardless of where they are born, what language they speak, or what resources they have. That vision is about more than access. It's about dignity. It's about inclusion. It's about whose knowledge is allowed to matter. But we need to ask honestly whether Gen AI supports that vision or quietly undermines it. Because while AI is often described as democratizing education, it's doing something far more complicated underneath the surface. AI is creating a system where access is not equal. Many Gen AI systems sit behind paywalls or tiered subscriptions, institutional access, or high bandwidth requirements. This creates a two-tier system, those who can afford and access AI-enhanced learning and those who can't. Instead of leveling the playing field, Gen AI risks reintroducing barriers that open education works to remove. And then there's the question of representation, of whose voices actually are being heard. The systems built by companies such as OpenAI are trained on vast amounts of data, but that data is not neutral. It reflects the world as it has been recorded, not the world as it is lived. It reflects dominant languages, dominant cultures, and dominant institutions. And so what emerges is a system that too often repeats the same pattern, amplifying the already visible while rendering the marginalized invisible. So a year ago, I asked Gen AI to generate me an image of a young woman wearing hearing aids because I'm a young woman that wears hearing aids. It couldn't seem to comprehend that. It either produced an old woman wearing hearing aids or a young woman with headphones. So I'm different. Therefore, I am not represented by AI. Open education, however, allows for authentic representation. This is affirmed by Maha Bali, who states, "I'm expressing why openness matters to my intersectional identity. The more oppression we experience in our context, the more vulnerable we are to openness, and paradoxically, the more likely we are to benefit from openness. Openness as liberation, as empowerment. For some of us, openness is the only way out of the darkness, and it's a sensibility and worldview that we would suffer without." What makes this more concerning is scale. These biases are not small or isolated. They are amplified across millions of interactions, quietly shaping what learners see as normal or correct knowledge at a global scale. So if we believe AI to be compatible with open education, are we willing to accept a version of education at the cost of equity, representation, and voice? We call AI progress, but if it makes education less inclusive, less representative, and less fair, then we need to ask who progress is really for. Thank you. I'm now going to hand it over to Lauren from the opposition team for her arguments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikki. And thank you also, Sarah, for opening us up. I'm going to focus today, I'm Lauren, I'm from Deakin. I'm going to focus my arguments today against the proposition that generative AI is fundamentally incompatible with open educational practices. And I just, again, as my colleague Sarah did, draw your attention to the very specific claim we are debating. The proposition is not whether there are tensions or ethical quandaries associated with generative AI in education. Those are there. The question is whether or not it's not whether they are difficult to reconcile or require careful navigation. The proposition is that they are fundamentally incompatible, like at the basic nature, that they are unable to work together in any meaningful way. That's a pretty strong claim. And a strong claim really only needs one counterexample to fail, and I'm going to give you several. Now, before I give you those examples, I just want to return, as Maze did and Nikki did, to the foundations of open education to explain why they are compatible. So it's easy to assume that open education is all about being open. Everything has to be open in order for it to be open education. And yes, openness is a very important part of open education. But what we need to remember is being open is a mechanism towards a deeper purpose. Being openness serves to open doors to education to those who would otherwise be unable to participate. Openness is a mechanism towards equity and access. If we look back to some of those beginnings of open education, we have the Universal Declaration for Human Rights in 1948, which said everyone has a right to education. And it recognized that for some people, there are barriers to accessing that right. So there's doors that need to be opened. Then the Open University of the United Kingdom was established about 20 years later with the explicit mission to facilitate educational opportunity and greater social justice by increasing access to anyone who had a desire to learn. And David Wiley, who's one of the founders of the open education movement, and specifically open educational resources, spent his career arguing the whole point of open content was to democratize access, to give more control over learning to the learners themselves. Now, my colleagues at USQ have focused a lot on creators. I want to draw our attention towards the learners themselves who are actually using open educational resources and open educational content, because open educational practices is not just about creating open resources, it's also about using them. So we have to remember, equity and access to education are the goal. And as my colleague Sarah said, generative AI is, for better or for worse, a part of the world we live in, a part of the educational systems that we are using to support our learners to participate meaningfully in that world. It's a bell that can't be unrung. Open education is about opening doors to education. Generative AI is part of education. We don't get to pick and choose which doors to open. That would go against the core fundamental point of open education. So when we're asking whether generative AI is fundamentally incompatible with open educational resources, what we're really asking is, does it advance or undermine equitable access to education? And we actually argue it's not just about fundamentally incompatible. We actually argue that generative AI advances open education. And I'm going to show you how. I'm going to give you a couple of vignettes. These are fictionalized vignettes that some colleagues and I at Deakin developed based on our own teaching experiences, and we shared them at a recent webinar. So the first vignette is Jian. So Jian is a financially stressed single mother. She works full-time, she has children in primary school, and she speaks English as an additional language. She reads English really well, but slowly. She's studying veterinary science, and she has to do a lot of reading, supplementary reading, tutorial presentation preparations, etc. But she can't refuse work shifts because her employment is precarious and the financial stakes are high. This is a student who has significant equity needs. Now, she may not wish to disclose these equity needs to access formal accommodations. But she is using generative AI in order to manage her equity needs. So generative AI is serving to facilitate greater access and equity for Jian in her learning. So there are significant equity affordances for Jian. There are also significant equity affordances for Rima, a student with dyslexia. She's using Notebook LM to help her parse dense passages from her course readings. So again, significant equity affordances. And these vignettes, while fictionalized, are supported by research. We've got research from the UK, we've got research from the United States, and research from Australia that show that students with disabilities, with caring responsibilities, language barriers, are using generative AI to manage their equity needs and increase access to education. Now, we know that copyright is an issue here, but when students, it's not a problem with open education. Open education is the solution. When course instructors prioritize open educational resources and open content, it actually increases students' ability to access those amazing equity affordances that generative AI are offering. So rather than them being fundamentally incompatible, they are fundamentally compatible.
Well, thank you. That marks the end of round 2. What we're going to do now is going to have 3 minutes break. We're going to send our debaters to breakout rooms. So I'm going to open it for them only. You don't need to join them. So we'll leave you there for 3 minutes and then we'll invite you back. Okay, just reminding you that the room will automatically close after 3 minutes. So we'll see you here again. All right.
Oh, sorry, which one do we?
Are you able to see the rooms? Yeah, fantastic. So we'll be able to join the opposition deacon, Sarah, as well as Lorraine. You'll be able to join a room called opposition deacon. Claire, you'll be able to join a room called affirmative USQ.
Sorry, I don't have any. Are we the public people?
Yeah, no, this is only for the debaters.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
We'll just wait then.
Yeah, we'll talk 3 minutes.
We just
together.
wait. Okay, cool.
Yeah. No worries, no worries. Okay, I hope it's all there. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. That was really interesting to hear. How is everyone feeling? Just need to see your faces now.
Yeah, it was really good debate, I thought. Very strong debate. Yeah, there's both sides, isn't there? You know.
Yeah, I thought the arguments that they
Very strong, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. All right. Look, so I do have like so many windows in front of me, so I'm trying to organize them. Okay, I've got some comments in the chat. Ash, hi Ash. For some of us, openness is the only way out of the darkness. That's nice, Ash. Also, Ashley Sutherland, hi Ashley. There's also a point that the tools could have been designed with respect to for authors, creators, etc., but the tech companies choose not to. Yeah, that's a very good point. This reflects an assumption that they had a right to use content without permission for or compensation. The extractive position. The companies could also have chosen to address fundamental issues of bias in their data sets, but again, choose not to. Very, very, very good point. I think the ethical consideration around generative AI, it's not only popular in open education, it's popular across the board. You'll hear it from different angles. Okay. Right, I take that point. The point that developments such as calculators were held as a tool for students' ability to do math, but also didn't bluntly steal other people. Yes, yes, yes. I think that's calculator example is always challenging. Okay. I think we have our debaters back now. Yeah. There we go, just waiting for them to join again. Can we spotlight our debaters if they're back? I've got Lorraine, got Nikki, Sarah, waiting for Claire.
I'm here.
Ah, here. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry, Claire.
that's all right.
Everyone is here. Fantastic. I hope that time was okay. We wanted to be a little bit more generous, but just gonna keep it in as much as we can, flexible. All right, let's get back to our debate. How are you feeling? Cool. Okay. Fantastic. All right, let's go back. We are going to start with, again, we're going to go back to Claire.
Thank you very much, Mace. And thanks to the opposition for their wonderful arguments. Okay, so we talked about how important the ethical side of open education is. And the opposition did talk about that we can't pick and choose between what elements we include in open education. And I'm sure that's very true. But I don't think that they actually linked the AI use with open educational practices at all. There's no doubt that the vignettes that were described are actually wonderful ways for people to manage their individual learning experiences and potentially get more out of it. But it wasn't actually linking it back to actual open educational practice, which allows for students and their educators to collaborate together and co-create something wonderful that then can be released to the world as renewable assessment that gives to more people. And then can be built upon year by year with future generations of students. That is the highest level of learning and thinking that is happening. The relationship between the student and the teaching staff, that is working at the highest level. And by having AI develop your learning materials, are you actually getting the very best out of it? Can you be sure that the material you're getting is 100% right, that there's not hallucination built in there? Is your consumption of that material that's been generated by AI actually high-level learning on your part, or are you being a fairly passive consumer and not much of it is being integrated into yourself and into your knowledge base and therefore into your practice? So those elements really do bother us with AI being brought into open educational practice. We see AI use as very useful as support tools, and they truly will have a powerful role within the wider educational experience. But because it lacks the human interaction, at the moment, we've got no idea about the knowledge chains, where the information is coming from. We haven't got the citation clarity. People people are being ripped off all over the world by these systems and platforms, producing the dominant paradigm. And this is fundamentally incompatible with how open educational practice has evolved, and what it aspires to, and what it wants to give to the world. So we definitely continue in our stand. We haven't changed our minds, that we think open educational practice and AI technologies are fundamentally incompatible. Thank you.
Thank you, USQ. Let's return to the core of today's debate. We are debating that open education practices and AI are fundamentally incompatible. Not that there is tension or they're difficult to reconcile, but they're completely unable to work together in a meaningful way. This is a very strong claim. Part of the arguments that USQs, my apologies, rest on is around the conflicts that Gen AI has with transparency, attribution, and creators' rights, breaking that reciprocal system that open education relies on. Also, there was mention about Gen AI increasing equity, reinforcing dominant power structures, and marginalizing voices. First, on the claim that Gen AI is an instruction rather than building on that reciprocal relationship. This argument assumes that because Gen AI systems lack transparency or clear attribution, that they're inherently incompatible with open education. But that does not prove incompatibility. It shows a problem with how the systems are currently designed and governed. So even if we can accept this concern, it doesn't demonstrate that AI and open educational practices cannot work together in a meaningful way. Open education is not necessarily defined by perfect systems. It is defined by the values that shape the systems. The same here applies. AI can operate within frameworks through transparent models, attribution practices, and ethical standards. And importantly, this argument focuses on really the creation of OER while ignoring what open education is really about, the use and adaptation of sharing of knowledge. AI can expand on those functions. It can help more people access and engage with open resources and not just extract from them. In the cases of the personal examples that Lauren shared earlier, we can see that. In terms of second claims and other arguments, as mentioned by USQ, they mention how Gen AI can increase inequity and reinforce dominant voices. This assumes that because bias and unequitable access exists today, that they define that AI must always be. And that is not a claim about incompatibility. It's a claim about the current limitations. So if we accept this concern, it doesn't demonstrate that AI and open education cannot work together in a meaningful way. Open education has always operated in unequal systems, and that has worked to make it more, and we are working to make it more inclusive. AI can be shaped in the exactly same way through localization, diverse data sets, and open access approaches. Yes, representation matters, but if we reject AI entirely, it doesn't solve that problem. Engaging with it is going to open practices even more. Finally, we do hear the phrase, as mentioned by USQ, that value is taken and not returned. This is a powerful critique, and it is not proof of incompatibility. It's a critique of how systems are currently structured. And again, if we accept this, it doesn't demonstrate that they cannot work together in a meaningful way. At no point have we seen or heard that they are and demonstrated that the open education practices are fundamentally incompatible. What we have heard is about the challenges, the ethics, the practical and structure, and we acknowledge those. We absolutely acknowledge that those challenges exist. But this debate is not about whether integration is difficult. It's about whether it's impossible. And they have not proven that. Without that proof, their case collapses and the proposition fails. I will now hand over to USQ for their closing statement. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. So the opposition had argued that there is opportunity for AI, and the issue is with how the systems are currently structured. Yeah, we agree. But at the moment, the systems are currently not set up to be compliant with copyright law and to be equitable for the people that are accessing it. The opposition has also given examples of equity cohorts using tools such as Notebook LM. These are not open examples. These have terms and conditions. They are not legally classified as open examples. So they have essentially argued that AI belongs in education, and there's no doubt that it does. But the key issue here is, does it belong in open education? And the key word of this debate is fundamental. So they keep talking about it being tensions and it's impossible. We don't agree. We do believe it's possible. I gave an example of using AI in some of my open works. But the key word is it fundamentally? So most times it is actually incompatible. So that's the key of this argument. Most of the time it's incompatible. And so we have proven that it is. So, it's incompatible with copyright law as it is today. And this law applies to all our students and all our educators. And as educators, we need to be role models for students and actually comply by Australian law. And obviously, it also has the issue of diversity and inclusion. Because if our AI systems only reflect the most dominant voices in this training data, then it's truly not opening education, it's narrowing it. It's not redistributing knowledge, it is reshaping it through an uneven lens. And that matters because open education was never just about making content, just as the opposition said. It's about who gets to be part of the conversation, who gets to contribute, who gets to be seen as a knower and a creator. If we lose that, then we lose the heart of open education itself. Thank you.
Hello again, everyone. Thank you, USQ, for your closing remarks. And thank you, everyone, for being here for what has been a genuinely lively discussion about the fundamental compatibility or incompatibility of generative AI and open education. Now, it's a big claim. We keep saying this. It's fundamentally incompatible. It's incompatible by nature. Not that there's a tension, not that there's a difficulty in reconciling it, but completely unable to work together in any meaningful way. And we have shown you that they can work together in a meaningful way when educators prioritize open educational resources. Their students can legally and ethically access the equity affordances the generative AI tools offer. We're not arguing that the generative AI tools themselves are open. We are arguing that there's a fundamental compatibility, that they can work together because open resources unlock the equity affordances offered by generative AI. Now, my colleagues from USQ have raised some real concerns, but I just want to emphasize their focus on creators and not learners, who are key members of the open education ecosystem. We agree that there is tension. We agree with the importance of reciprocity, but we do not agree with the exclusion of learners from this debate and how they can use open educational resources to access the equity affordances of generative AI. There are tensions, there are complexities, there are things we must continue to think about carefully as educators. We're not telling anyone to illegally use proprietary resources with a generative AI. We're actually telling people, use more open resources because your students are already accessing the equity affordances offered by generative AI. There's a fundamental compatibility, especially for those of us who are advocating for open education. We can use generative AI as a lever to persuade more people to adopt open education. Generative AI does not undermine equitable access to education. It advances it. The proposition fails.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's fantastic. I did really enjoy the debate and listening to both, and similar to Ash, swinging between the two. That was fantastic. All right. How are you feeling, everyone? Fantastic. Audience, how are you feeling? I'll take your reactions as well, or messages in the chat. Okay. Let's see, Julian. Thank you, Julian. Janice is saying it's an excellent debate. The relationship between open education and AI is complicated. I do agree with you. Already most content on the internet is AI generated, and soon it will be will just recycle its own content and do unable to switch between the new ideas and the noisy one. The only way to prevent AI model collapse is to train AI model on bespoke data. I think our open education will play an important role in this training, and there will be immense value in human curated open resources. Open education can be a savior of AI. Love that. That's a really wonderful statement. Julian, I do actually agree with that. It takes us a little bit further. I want to share my screen with you again, because I want to remind you where we were before the debate. Okay, we were up to here. Likely people leaning towards generative AI and open education are compatible. There is a lot of opportunities for genuine co-creation and greater efficiency. A little bit less on the other side. Okay, let's see what you think now, audience, after this debate. Okay, let's do the same thing again. Where do you sit now? So if you click on the link in the chat or use menti.com and search for join my code in Google and just type the code, you'll be able to participate. Okay, more people are joining and more are answering. These are really interesting ideas that you've brought up. I particularly like the argument around equity and whose voices we're hearing here. It's a very good one. My problem was always like what happens between the end user and the LLMs before searching and doing all the statistical operations to find the most likelihood of next word to appear in next to that token. All that happens at the back end, and LLMs, what actually happens is something like a black box we don't really know much about. But I also like the point that open is a mechanism, and I do agree with you. I think Lorraine mentioned this. It's a mechanism to equity. We can maybe by policy and design improve that compatibility between the two. So it was a really interesting debate, swinging our minds between the two. Okay, let's see what the audience. Anyone else would like to vote? Got 26 so far. Okay, let's see where people. Ooh, okay, that is interesting. So now less people think that they are compatible, actually. That's very interesting. So both on the same point between the two, but that if we compare it to the previous one, so I'll remind you of the previous statement, where people more towards leaning towards they're actually compatible. Now USQ convinced them a little bit, which is, oh, there you go. No more people are joining. All right, this is fantastic. I think the whole point of this debate is really to learn and to think more about how these new technologies are impacting every area, but also think that we as open education advocate, we need to look, as Lorraine, Claire, Nikki, and Sarah showed us today, we look critically with a critical eye to these innovations, these new technologies. So that is very, very interesting and wonderful to hear from everyone. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So we are very close, but I think ESQ convinced people. with many with your arguments. All right, now this is really the end of our session today. I would like to thank everyone, and I would like to open it for our speakers. If you have anything to say, would like to add, would like to hear from you first. If there is anything you'd like to share.
Well, I think we're actually all winners today, because it's not about one side or the other. This is what universities do well, isn't it? We debate all of the sides, we get diverse perspectives in together, and we do our very best to have a broadly relevant educational experience for our communities. So yes, well done to you, Mace and Helen and team, and Jenny for putting together a wonderful debate.
Thank you, Claire. And it was wonderful having you with us. And, thank you for all the support that you're doing for this and for the open, the Escalate Open Education Practices Special Interest Group. All right. Anything else someone would like to share with us?
It was just it made me really critically think about the topic. Like, I haven't been in open education for a while, but it was a really good opportunity for me to actually come back into the space, and I found that I had a lot of big feelings about this actually. And on both sides actually, I did think about the opposition side, and there's so many points for both, and I do see that AI is always going to be in our future, but it's about how we change the systems around it. Congratulations everyone for a great event.
I actually think it's going to be the leadership of the education sector that's going to help save AI from itself and produce something that isn't a net negative for the world.
Yes, we're really looking forward to see that happening. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Nikki. We have a few minutes left if anyone would like to share anything. Actually, people are still voting. We're actually equal now, which is good to see. All right. Well, thanks again, Nikki, Claire, Sarah, Lorraine, thank you so much. Audience, everyone who joined us today, thank you. Appreciate also people who help promote the sessions. We will have another session at the end of the week. Jenny Wallace, my colleague here, will be chairing this one. We'll talk about wiki assignments. So on the 24th of April, join us for that session. And if you are around Sydney, around the UTS campus, you're most welcome to join our celebration. It's an in-person, so it is going to be on campus on the 22nd. That's on Wednesday. And also wait for the blogs that we're going to share from from the week, and also more promotion that I would like to do for Australian universities doing open education work. Have a wonderful week, everyone. And thank you for joining. Bye-bye.